Franz found the support and the validation to pursue his intellectual journey over a lifetime, to achieve a public role as a leader of the anti-war movement, to raise a family and build a non-profit news service, to forge friendships with colleagues like Peter Dale Scott and Leon Wapsie, whose names both a son and a grandson now bear. It is also where he and I met. Now I have to explain those photographs. I was Franz's student in 1963-64, studying Chinese history. I wrote a paper on the Yellow Turbans, the first great peasant revolution in history. And Franz gave me an A+. He wrote on the paper, "Come see me." He sat in his basement office in Grinnell Hall, the sun pouring through the window behind his desk. And he asked me, "Why do you write about the Yellow Turbans? And what's your interest in China?" I told him I felt drawn to China since my early teens, growing up in New York, and planned to go to Hong Kong to become a journalist. Did I mention it was Pearl Buck and Ingrid Bergman's film, Into the Sixth Happiness, that set off my interest? No. But I did tell him I found what Eric Hobsbawm called the millenarian visions driving Chinese peasants 2 centuries before the birth of Christ to be absolutely riveting. We became aware of each other at that moment, a flicker of recognition of some common bond. I joined his graduate seminar the next semester, though I was an undergraduate. It met at 7 p.m. Joyce Colgren and her husband Ed are here, and she was ahead of it at the time. And it was on Shattuck Avenue, off campus, already closer to Asia than Grinnell Hall. He'd come wearing casual clothing, a black knit short-sleeved shirt, and dark glasses. How does I remember that so vividly? Sometimes we students would talk about the fact that he had had several glasses of wine. He took the class once to dinner in San Francisco, Chinatown, and his vigorous defense of Mao Zedong made a student from Taiwan cry. My classmate, Fu Mei Chen, now a well-known leader in the Taiwan independence movement, and I talked about the incident at length. We found his passion inspiring. Unlike any other professor, he seemed consumed by the subjects he taught, as if they mattered to how he lived his life. We decided he was an artist as well as a scholar, and we forgave him for making her cry. A week before I left for Hong Kong, I called Franz on the kitchen phone in my parents' apartment in New York. He said he'd write to a journalist friend there named Stanley Carnot. "Stan can help you get a job," he said. It was 1964. The Vietnam War was becoming the story of the decade, and Stanley offered me a job in Saigon if I could pay my way. But I was more interested in China. "Go see my friend Derek Davies at the Far Eastern Economic Review and use my name," Stan said. By that afternoon, I had a job as China editor of FEER. I sent Franz my first article for the review on China's steel industry. And when he came to Hong Kong shortly after on business, he called. To call him back, I memorized my first sentence in Cantonese. Gaozao for Professor Schurmann, Bindola. Franz and I got together in the spring of 1968, 5 years after our conversation about the Yellow Turbans. Derek Davies was visiting San Francisco. I'd invited Franz to join us for lunch. They stayed together that afternoon and asked me to join them for dinner. I did. I went home that night with Franz, and I never left. We bought our first home because of a dog, a small black terrier we found in Dolores Park. When we took him home, the landlord said, "Keep the dog and leave, or get rid of the dog and stay." We left. We named the dog Omen as a harbinger of our life together, as a good omen. But Omen was willful and stubborn, like that Monkey King. A friend said he had been some high Confucian official who'd been corrupt and was reincarnated as a dog. Omen died at 18 when our sons were already in their early teens, the first of many dogs that became a fixture of our household. Dogs were always a point of contention between us. "I don't like dogs," Franz would point out as he cleaned up their crap, fed them, and our dog population grew. Memories for an old lady's drawer, perhaps, but also a way of recalling the start of an intellectual intimacy that would hold us together for 45 years and hold our children and dogs, as well as Pacific News Service, Yo, The Beat, and now New America Media, together as well. The family that works together stays together, Franz would often remark in later years, as much to tell me as to remind himself. And when things became emotionally raw, as inevitably they will in a marriage, I'd realized that to break up our family would also mean breaking up the journalistic enterprise that had become our extended family. What was it like to have an intellectual soulmate? A never-ending conversation about the world. A partner whose bedside reading would be the encyclopedia. Franz did not dance, and I swear to you, he did not flirt. He was passionate, but not romantic. Romance was not a word he used. Movies, like dogs, he tolerated on my behalf, unless they starred Jeanne Moreau or Gong Li. "There's no such thing as happiness," he would tell me, and though it made me sad to hear him say it, it wasn't said with bitterness, it was more an observation. I always wondered what he meant by it. Ideas were our aphrodisiac. We were driving one Saturday to Carmel to have dinner with friends. It was the early 1990s, and Franz started talking about a group of students whose manifesto he was translating. He had a Pashtun dictionary with him in the car. There had been a flare-up that morning, prompting Franz to stalk out of the house. The mood was tense. "Who are these students?" I asked as I drove. "They're Islamic revolutionaries, mostly illiterate and poor. They call themselves the Taliban," he said, "but they're bringing order back to Afghanistan without firing a shot. Let me read you this." So our conversation would start again, filling up the silence, covering up the hurt. Feelings were not discussed in our household, not in any great depth, which is not to say that feelings did not erupt often. Franz was not given to self-reflection, to explorations of what it means that I am I and you are you. If he sensed disrespect, not just for his person, but through some trivializing of human experience, he'd lash out, whether in a crowded elevator or at the kitchen table. When his first wife, the revered Lonnie Ding, took him to a psychiatrist for marriage counseling, Franz took the man by the collar, fist to his face. "Just what exactly am I paying you for?" Bonnie and I laughed about that, and I know the story from her. There was no roadmap for navigating the tripwires. Yet Franz was capable of enormous generosity and patience. You had only to want to know, to want to explore.